Good evening, everyone. This is David Mandel with OHEL Children's Home and Family Services, welcoming everyone on this webinar, Reimagining Grief in Preparation for the Yomim Noraim. We're speaking this evening with many individuals who are experiencing or re-experiencing some type of a grief, bereavement, or trauma personally, or that you may know anyone in this situation. Our objective this evening is to have a conversation with our distinguished panelists and also invite you to ask your questions or make your comments on the chat function on your screen, which we will see. You can either ask it privately or publicly so that everyone can see it. And after our individual on the panel each have a conversation to speak, we will spend enough time getting to your questions and your comments. At the end of the evening, we also invite you to stay an additional moment and to complete a survey, which is very important for us in terms of being able to continue these type of conversations. We have a perspective that each one of these conversations, irrespective of how many people are listening, 50, 100, 200, 600, that we only are speaking to one of you. All of us are only speaking to one of you on this webinar. You are that one individual that is looking to hear a word, a piece of information, a conversation that could help you or a family member get through a very difficult circumstance. And we know that we will be able to help you this evening. So we are speaking only to you, not to all the rest of the people that are on this call. Let us begin with Rabbi Yosef Sonnenschein, who is Rav of Kahal B'nai Shalom of Waterbury, who is Menahel of Landers Beis Medrash LeTalmud. Rabbi Sonnenschein, it is our privilege to have you join us this evening to share with us your introductory remarks.
Thank you so much. The truth is that I'm going into tonight's webinar feeling a tremendous sense of humility. On one hand, every time I have this chus to work together with OL is another experience in humility. I'm struck each time in the preparation and in the execution, watching these giants of chesed work tirelessly for the sole purpose of providing support to their brothers and sisters. And it's breathtaking, and it's not done in a haphazard way, but the presentation is always with compassion, with grace, with professionalism, with sophistication, and it's really a schus to be able to be joined by such a special group of people. The other part of my sense of humility tonight has to do with you, my grieving sisters and brothers. Let me explain what I mean. Rosh Hashanah is a time to recognize and accept Malchus, as we know, the sovereignty of Hashem. And on Rosh Hashanah, we know our job is not to do a detailed tshuva like we do on Yom Kippur with vidois and al chetz. Our job is to present ourselves in front of our King. Our job is to show up, to say, I am here. I'm ready to fulfill my responsibilities. I can only imagine what it must mean to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that a week before Rosh Hashanah, his children, not just his children, his hurting children, those who are grieving, those whose losses seem enormous and unimaginable, are coming together to find a path to be able to show up when Rosh Hashanah comes. In the place of shutting down, which can be so tempting when we're in pain, you are stepping up to present yourself to Hashem. The voice that I hear just from the reality of this event, from each one of you, is a voice that is saying, Hashem, I don't necessarily know how I will find the strength or even the willingness to daven on Rosh Hashanah. But I'm doing what I need to do today so I can stand in front of you on that day. To you, my dear brothers and sisters, I say you have already done it. Your being here today is a loud and bold statement. That despite everything, Hashem, I haven't forgotten you. I may be confused, unsure, struggling with anger, with apathy, but I'm here. Over the next hour or so, we're going to hear from others who have gone through losses of various kinds. And I just want to express from myself how grateful I am to each one of our speakers for their willingness to be vulnerable and to allow us to have a window into their experience. At the same time, it's crucial that we know that no two experiences are the same. Each loss is unique. Each person is unique. Each personality is unique. And there are so many layers that are difficult to talk about. You know, I feel sometimes that the world likes to look at every loss as like a fairy tale loss. The loss of someone who was perfect and with whom I had a perfect relationship. But behind the scenes, we know that there is no such thing as a fairy tale loss. Loss is filled with regrets, resentments, confusion, and so many other emotions that are difficult to express and to process. When my wife got up from Shiva for her father, a community member approached her and said, "I'm so jealous of you. You were able to sit Shiva missing your father. My father was abusive. My Shiva was so much more complicated." And this is just an example of how differently we can be experiencing things. So listen carefully to the speakers as they describe their experience, but know that your feelings and reactions are yours alone, and nobody can dictate or judge what you are feeling or experiencing. So, some people will go into Rosh Hashanah just waiting to pour out their hearts to Hashem. They'll cry with Hashem. They'll take refuge in Hashem. But not everyone is like that. One woman told me that although when her son was alive and struggling, she felt like Hashem was her support and her strength. But when her son passed away, she found it very difficult to daven at all. Some may be feeling angry at Hashem, where although we logically know that everything Hashem does is for the best, but our hearts may be struggling to accept that. Some may wish Yom Tov wouldn't be coming at all, just wishing it away, hoping to endure it, to survive it. So I just want to say as an introduction that there's no right and wrong way. Our feelings are our feelings. And this is a Das Torah as well. We must give ourselves the ability to feel what we feel. We can't force our feelings. While it's important to be accepted by others, but the most important thing is to be accepted by yourself. You have been through a loss, and you have to give yourself space. And yes, even if those feelings are feelings of anger at Hashem, what can I say? Hashem is very mature. He knows and understands that loss is complex and takes time. Give yourself time to heal. I promise you that Hashem is giving you that time. This is not the time for lifelong decisions or philosophical searching. It's a time to accept our feelings as what they are, the feelings of someone in pain, and to know that Hashem is a loving Father who will wait for you until you are ready. My advice as we head into Rosh Hashanah is not to plan our emotions and not to try to control them. Let's just go in b'tmimus, ready to experience the day in the best way that we can, and know that wherever we are, that's where Hashem will meet us. And this, by the way, is true for family members as well. Perhaps I have the strength to go to shul, to face the crowds, to know that they're thinking about what a nebuch I am, to cry to Hashem, but perhaps my children aren't ready for that, or perhaps my spouse isn't ready for that. And part of our experience is to accept that every family member has their own journey. and that there's no right way. I want to share with you an interesting perspective. This is something that I've had a hard time writing down because I think of it every Rosh Hashanah morning as I'm walking to shul, and I forget about it by Matzah Rosh Hashanah, but b'siyata d'shmaya, it popped into my head this week. Every time that Rosh Hashanah comes out on a work day, like Monday through Friday, I'm walking to shul, and some of you live in very frum communities. I live in Waterbury, which is a frum community, but I could still see the cars driving, everyone heading to work, and the school buses heading to the public schools. And I'm always astonished as I'm walking to shul, getting my kittel ready, getting ready for Tkiyas Shofar. Like the entire fate of the world hangs in the balance, and 7 billion people have no idea. The life is just going on. The state of this entire country is being decided, and the average Joe has absolutely no idea. It's like if you work for a big company and the CEO is deciding on the fate of the company, so the custodian is not necessarily invited to that meeting. The chef is not necessarily invited to that meeting. And yet, we are invited to that meeting. While the King of Kings decides the fate of the world, it was important to him that I know about it. I was invited to this meeting. Why? Because he loves me. Because I'm his son. Because my actions at this meeting matter. Because my words matter to him. Because my feelings matter to him. And it's something to think about on a Rosh Hashanah, where this small group of people, I know maybe you daven in a massive shul and you feel like everyone is here, but trust me, in the world, they don't know that it's Rosh Hashanah today or what that means. But we know because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us there. So recognize that no matter what you're able to do on Rosh Hashanah, the mere fact that you're aware of the day reminds us that we're special to Hashem, that He cares about us, and that He's listening to our tefillos and to our feelings. I think perhaps the most difficult part of a Yomim Noraim after loss is the sense that I davened and davened and davened, and it doesn't seem like Hashem listened. Someone once said to me, like, if only there was some response, some light went on, something. I just got some response that Shemayim is listening, I would feel better. But that's part of the nisayon that we have, that we don't feel that response. And I want you to think about something. Right now, I'm looking at a screen. I can't see you. There are a few presenters on the screen that I can see, but my computer tells me that there are 184 people on. I can't see you. I'm speaking to you. I hope I'm connecting with you. I hope we're forming a bond, but I can't see you. And yet I have to believe that you're there on the other side of this screen. And you're not only listening to me, but you're connecting with me. Maybe you have tears in your eyes, as I do. Maybe you're finding meaning and connection in this. And I cannot see you. And I think it's such an important mashal, because when you daven on Rosh Hashanah, on Yomim Noraim, or any time, you may feel like you're looking at a Zoom screen where you can't see who's on the other side. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there, just like you're there listening to me. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is feeling what you're feeling, just like you're feeling what I'm feeling. And perhaps this could be a little bit of a mashal, a little bit of a chizuk, to know that whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides, which is sometimes unfathomable, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there and with us and feeling with us. I want to just end wishing every single one of you and wishing Klal Yisrael that we shouldn't need to have gatherings like this anymore, that the day should come, that the shilas that we have to get together, that David, you should have to make a webinar before Rosh Hashanah, because people have shilas how to express their joy to Hashem, and they don't know what to do with how fortunate they feel. and they don't know how to connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu because they're just so overwhelmed from His goodness, and that we shouldn't have to catch our breaths and try to figure out how to cope with the difficulties, with the trauma, with the sometimes feeling of having a shattered life. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give every single one of you, and every one of you are such heroes, even just that you're here, such heroes. Hashem should give every single one of you the strength to be able to have the nechama that you deserve, and to be able to find bracha, and Hashem should transform your lives. May afela le'ora, and from avelos to simcha. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Sonnenschein. I understood that your clear message to everyone listening is that any feeling or emotion or question that you have as you come into Rosh Hashanah or the Chagim is that it's legitimate and that it's your question and that anything that you're experiencing is fine. No one can question it. Rav Soloveitchik writes that when he lost people that were very close to him, there was only one way that he found comfort. Rav Soloveitchik writes that the only way that he found comfort, which is what you expressed so eloquently, was to turn into Hashem. There are many people that have difficulty, legitimately so, questioning. So we just speak about the Gedolim, and Rav Soloveitchik speaks about how he turned into Hashem and looked for comfort from Hashem. Thank you very much,
Thank
Rav
you.
Sonnenschein. Fegi Steinmetz serves as OHEL ambassador for OHEL's new Partners in Grief program. Fegi is the mother of Dovi, who tragically lost his life in Miron 5 years ago. Following his passing, Fegi and her husband Shlomo in Montreal launched the impactful Ani Mamin initiative. The Ani Mamin initiative. She's also shared her story widely, appearing on numerous podcasts and platforms to bring strength and inspiration to others. Fegi, it's very good to see you again. Looking forward to hearing from you. Fegi Steinmetz.
Hi, it's Fagi, and it's truly, truly an honor to be here this evening. Thank you, Ohel. It's also very intimidating to be in the company of such accomplished and incredible people. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm a little over 4 years into my grief journey. I lost my 21-year-old son, Davi. He was one of the 45 Kedoshim of Meron. He was Nifter on Lag BaOmer 2021. On that day, my life as I knew it was over. Davi was learning in the mirror. He was in his prime. And on that fateful Lag BaOmer, his life was cut short. The Fagi that you're seeing here tonight is not the Fagi that I once was. You're getting Fagi 2.0. I'm not better. I'm not worse. It's just that circumstances changed me, and this is who I am now. Grief is an exceptionally, exceptionally lonely journey. Very few people can relate to a loss of this magnitude. It's horrible. For my family and myself, it was a very public loss, and we were thrust into the limelight. It was difficult for me to actually grieve by myself. I tried to reach out for help, but truthfully, Canada, I live in Montreal, at that time was in the throes of a COVID lockdown, and there was really nobody that was available to speak to me, to talk to me, not via Zoom. Everyone was inundated with phone calls, and a lot of people needed help at the time, and I was really all alone, and I felt very, very isolated. And in my isolation, I was so desperate, but there was no one that was able to relate to me. And that's why I really am honored and proud to be partnering up, and I'm the ambassador to OHEL's new program called Partners in Grief. Partners in Grief will be a program where there will be mentors, those that are further along in their grief journey, and mentees, those that are unfortunately starting out in their journey. The mentors will be there for the mentees. They'll be there to listen, to hear, to validate. It's something that was so necessary and needed, and I'm very much looking forward to helping and to being a part of this incredible program that OL will now be offering. We are approaching the Yomim Noraim, the days of Awe, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot is right after. It's a very stressful time of year. It's a stressful time of year for anyone. I mean, even more so for someone who's suffered the loss of a loved one. I mean, there's simply not enough time in the day. We're cooking, we're cleaning as mothers. There's just so much to do. If only I had 8 more hours. And then all the emotions that are involved. For me, when I set my table for Yom Tov, even though I know in the back of my mind my son Davi would probably not be coming home for this Yom Tov, it's a punch in the stomach. It's hard for me. I'm uber emotional. Don't call me. Don't ask me for things because I just, there's not very much for me to give. And to be honest, I don't leave an empty place for him or set a seat for him, because after a lot of thought, I realized this is how Hashem wants my family to look right now. Davi's just not here. And I'm not pretending. I acknowledge the fact he's not here, and it's really very hard. And my mind goes to places. Would he have been married? What does his wife look like? What do the kids look like? And Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it's hard. It's especially hard because we spend the days davening, and we talk about life, and we talk about things that Hashem is going to give us and what we want and what we need. And it's full of triggers for me. We say, Avinu Malkeinu, Hashem grant us A, B, C, D, and E. There's so much that we're asking for, but I kind of feel like 5 years ago when I said all those tefillos, I don't know. I know that Davi's Petira, Davi's death was not a gezerah on me. It wasn't. It wasn't a decree on me, but it took a lot of time and a lot of very hard work for me to come to that conclusion. It didn't come easily. It was a lot of introspection. The very first year after my loss, I remember telling my husband that I'm not going to shul. I can't go to shul. And my husband was absolutely horrified. He said, how could you be? You have so much to be thankful to Hashem for. You have to go to shul. I said, no, I'm not. And he called a Rav, and the Rav said very clearly, your wife does not need to go to shul. She needs to hear shofar. She can daven from wherever she wants. She can daven however she wants. And that validation felt so amazing to me that somebody understood I wasn't okay. So now on Rosh Hashanah, I go to shul, I hear shofar. I daven the quiet Shemona Esrei, I hear some more shofar blowing, and then I leave, because the tefillah that usually comes right after is in the Nisana Tokef, and it talks about mi yachya, mi yamos, who's going to live and who's going to die, mi bekitzo, mi lo bekitzo, who in its right time, who not in his right time. I can't hear that. Nobody wants to hear me sobbing and crying, because that tefillah, it's just a tefillah that evokes so much emotion for me, and I simply can't be there. It's my self-preservation that when I leave shul, I'm okay. My son Davi, he died in a tragedy, but his life was by no means tragic. He lived an amazing and an incredible life, and I don't want him to be defined as a tragedy, because he wasn't. And now, especially during this time of year, I'm so appreciative of people who reach out to me and tell me stories that they remember about my son, or tell me funny things that happened with my son, because he's so much a part of my life and my family's life. And I want to hear about those stories. Some of them I never heard of. And it's a tremendous nechama for me. It really gives me a lot of comfort. And to that friend who sends me flowers with a note that says, have a good Yom Tov. I know it's a hard time of year for you, and I'm thinking of you. You have no idea that you made my Yom Tov so much more bearable, so much easier. And thank you for acknowledging me. Thank you for letting me know that I have a hard time. Over the years, from when I was probably a teenager, I davened for so many different things. And there are so many roles that I davened for. And yes, Baruch Hashem, I get to play those roles now. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a Bobby, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, and I'm a friend. And these are amazing roles that I play. I multitask, I do them really, really well, or at least I try to. Some I'm better at than others. But there's one role that I never asked for, but was thrust upon me without asking me first. And that's the role of the grieving mother. I excel at that role. Unfortunately, it's very natural for me. This Yom Tif or any Yom Tif that comes up, many people light a Yortzeit Lach, but as per my Rav's instruction, I don't, because I, Baruch Hashem, have parents. When people go to daven on Yom Kippur and they say Yisker, I don't, because Baruch Hashem, like I said, I have parents. As a side note, there's actually no tefillah in Yisker for a child, for a parent that loses a child. When a person suffers a loss, usually they get a title with that loss. When you lose a parent, you become a yasam, an orphan or a yasoma. And when you lose a spouse, you become an alman or an almana. I don't have any title. There's no title for someone who lost their child. My title is, I'm Davi Steinmetz's mother. I suffer my loss in silence. I grieve quietly because I don't have any tefillos to say for the loss of my child. I do it in my own very special way, with the tears rolling down my face, with no one to see them. Like I said, I'm Davi's mother. This year, may we all be inscribed in the book of life. We should receive the yeshuos and the refuos that we need. All our tefillos should be answered l'tova, and we all merit to see the coming of Mashiach now. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Fagi. And I heard you say clearly, and I've heard this before when you've said it, that don't tell me that my son Dovi was a tragedy. Tell me wonderful stories about him. Tell me how you know him. Make me smile. Make me laugh. I've cried. I'm going to continue crying. I don't need you to tell me how I need to cry. Tell me how I need to laugh about my son Dovi. Rabbi Sonnenschein, if I can give you some homework, I just love the idea that I can give a Rav some homework. Fagi mentioned something very important that Dr. Blumenthal also speaks about, that there is no word like there is for a yosem, a yesoma, an orphan, or an alman or an almana, a widow or a widower. There's no such word for the loss of a child. And when we say yisker, we say it for our parents, for our uncles, our aunts, siblings, the Kedoshim, the 6 million. Excuse me. Rabbi Sonnenschein, if I can give you some homework to speak to others in the field of the Gedolim, and just like we added tefillah, this may be too large of a question, but I'm going to say it. Just like we've added a tefillah to on Tisha B'Av to the 6 million, and just like we added a tefillah on Tisha B'Av to all those that died on the 7th of October, maybe Rav Sonnenschein and Gedolim can come up with a tefillah for the unfortunate loss of a child for those who want to say it on Yisker. Dr. Benji Malyer is a clinical psychologist, and he serves as the clinical director of the intake department and assistant director of crisis services at Achieve Behavioral Health. He also maintains a private practice in Teaneck, New Jersey, where he specializes in working with individuals coping with grief and trauma. Our very conversation this evening. Benji, Dr. Meyer, lost his father 7 years ago. Dr. Benji Meyer, it's a pleasure that you're joining us this evening.
So first of all, I want to thank OHEL really for the opportunity to be part of this really amazing and important panel. As Rabbi Sonnenschein and Mrs. Steinmetz said, it's really with a lot of humility to sit alongside really such amazing and esteemed speakers, including one of my own role models, and Dr. Blumenthal, someone who I learned tremendously from, and I'm always listening to him and trying to learn more from. But most importantly, to everyone's here tonight, it really takes a lot of courage, even if people's faces are not seen on the screen, to join a conversation like this and to take a very proactive effort in trying to work through the grief, something which I didn't have the courage or the strength to do at all times. And I try to do now. And it's a lot of chizuk to all the people that come here tonight. So what I really want to do is I just want to share a bit from my own journey, some of the steps that I have tried, that I've learned, and I continue to try to take, in the hope that even one piece might be meaningful for one person or many people here. So to provide a little bit of context, I grew up in a home in which my own father lost his father at a very young age. My Zaidi had a heart attack. He was a Holocaust survivor, and I was never zocheh to meet my Zaidi. Growing up, my Zaidi was spoken about often. My father spoke about him constantly, basically on a daily basis. It was almost as if he was present in our own home. My father carried a very, very unique balance in the way he carried himself in the home and outside. He was a deeply happy person who really found a ton of meaning in life. And yet at the same time, his eyes were always wet with tears. It was as if the tears were ready to come at all times. Really, to me, the lingering pain of losing a father so young and the person he missed so greatly. So about 7 years ago, after my father was sick for a period of several years, my father passed away. It was an incredibly difficult period. The void, the pain that was greater by far than anything I've ever experienced. Something which, even when I reflect on it now, it's hard to even remember how deep that pain was. As we're coming now closer to the Yom Noraim, I think about the Yom Noraim that year. I remember how painful it was to go to shul without sitting next to my father. The thought of going to shul without his tallis over his head, with his face covered in tears. How was I supposed to go to shul? It was something brutal. I couldn't help but reflect. I remember that year looking around at other fathers with their own sons or other children sitting next to each other, and I got resentment. I was angry at them. Why are they zocheh to sit with their own fathers and I can't? The loneliness I would see was terrible. It was unbearable. My father had that stabling force in my life. He was the person I went to for advice for everything. He was the one I knew I could always rely on, no matter what the situation. He was always calm and stable. Without him, the world felt shaky. It was destabilized. I almost felt like no one could really understand what I was going through. So why even try to express it? I kept it to myself and just went through day by day. I still remember as the Yom Noraim went past and went to Sukkot. One of the hardest memories was Simchas Torah. I went to my sister in Baltimore. And I remember Simchas Torah was always a highlight for me. I loved dancing with the Torah. It was something that gave me chiyus. It gave me energy for the whole year. But that year, I just sat on the side. I was watching others dance, and I just thought to myself, if only they knew the pain I was in, they wouldn't be able to dance either. But I felt completely alone, complete loneliness. But I want to propose two ideas, some things that helped me personally, and I'm hoping could help others. So over time, I came across an idea that kind of gave me the language to start moving forward. So it was based on something my brother once quoted, based in the Hakdama of Mesilas Yesharim. The Ramchal says in a line of Yisod HaChasidus v'Shoresh v'Ha'avoda, which loosely translated the foundation and the roots of our service in Avodas Hashem. So we are trying to understand what's the difference between a Yisod and a Shoresh. A Yisod meaning a foundation, and a Shoresh meaning the root of something. The Yisod, the foundation of something, it could hold up a building. It could hold up anything. It's a base. But if that foundation is knocked down, the building is going to collapse with it. A shoresh, on the other hand, roots are something different. While there may be some sort of foundation, there may be some sort of core base, but the roots could spread very far and wide, something that gives chiyus, something that gives vitality and energy independent. It could sustain life, even if the, so to speak, the base where it comes from is now disconnected. To me, this was a vital part of moving forward. Of course, when we lose a loved one, in my case, when I lost my father, it was natural. I just wanted to hold on to the relationship the way it used to be, the conversations that we used to have, the walks we used to take, going to shul together, learning together. There was nothing I loved more than calling him on a Motzei Shabbos and sharing a Vart or a Divrei Torah that I thought over Shabbos. But that was no longer possible. The thought of moving on without our loved one can be deeply painful. Often there can be feelings of guilt of how can I move on? However, the relationships that we have with the person who passed away, unfortunately, that's just not possible anymore. And it's painful. It's terrible. It took me a while, but I was finally able to recognize that although the relationship I continue to crave with my father is not possible, the roots, so to speak, that my father worked to spread is present. That we and myself had the ability to work on ourselves, to learn to live in the world in a new way than what we are used to, so to speak, to develop a new type of relationship with our loved ones, despite them not being here. The painful, but also necessary transition is to shift from the relationship we had, what I would call represented by the Yisod, the foundation, to a new kind of relationship, one represented by the shoresh, the roots, the one that spreads and can spread life even if the foundation is no longer there. I worked to learn how to live in a new world and establish a new kind of relationship with my father. I just want to share a couple of personal examples to try to make this a little bit more salient that people could try to understand. Growing up, my father, throughout the Noraim and throughout the year, he always kept a picture of his own father, of my Zaidi and his sitter. It was a small little picture, an old black and white picture. And on the Noraim, I just remember him taking the picture out, stroking the picture, just looking at it. Could have been for even an hour at a time without saying any words of tefillah. He would connect with his father through those memories and through the davening. He was as if reliving that relationship just in a current way. Today, I do the same. I have a picture from my wedding day of my father and I keep that picture of my father and my sitter at all year, and especially Yom Noraim. And when I need comfort, advice, or reassurance, I take it out. I don't care about the davening around me. I don't care what's going on around me. And I just think about what he might have told me. What's the eitzah? What's the advice he would have given me? What's the words of chizik? Or just knowing that he was there is the stabilizing force. Another thing that I've done, similar. My father used to write letters to us before the Yom Noraim. One 2-page letters telling us our unique qualities, why he loved us, all the confidence in us. Even now, I have a whole stack of them. I go home to Yom Noraim, and sometimes I want to leave my machzer at home. I don't really need my machzer. I want my letters, and I read them, and I connect to the Father, and it reminds me of the confidence, not that he had in me, that he still has in me, and the confidence that I need to have in myself. Of course, not everyone's going to have those particular examples, and we shouldn't. But I believe all of us can find ways, whether personal, practical, or spiritual, to continue a connection with our loved ones and to find new ways to connect with our loved ones. There could be many ways of doing this. It can be in davening, sitting and having a conversation as if that person was there. It could be thinking about particular places I used to go. It could be going to Simcha Beis HaShalebes that were special events. Every single person could be at a Suda singing the songs that they used to sing. Every single person can find a way to connect in a meaningful way with the person that unfortunately is no longer here, whether it's a parent, in my case, a spouse, a child, a sibling, a close friend, anyone. It's not the same. And I'm not going to lie and pretend like it is. And it could feel even more painful at times because it reminds us of what's missing. And the relationship is definitely not the same. But the goal is not to replace the relationship that's not here anymore. It's allow us to learn in a different way, to establish a new relationship with our loved one and to learn to live in a new world. This may be a parent, a spouse, a child, or someone else. But working to find ways to connect to that individual in their absence could be incredibly meaningful. I'm just going to add, I've worked with a lot of individuals, whether clients or friends who've gone through this, and they're resistant to this. This is not going to help. And I understand that because it's really hard to move forward. I would just encourage, just give it a try. Think about different ways. Not every way works, and each person will have to find a way that they connect to. I just want to add one more piece that I found particularly helpful, which I was quite resistant to initially. And that's the importance of connecting with others. I remember in the first year, after my father passed away, I really believed no one could understand my pain or what my relationship with my father had been. I would speak to my siblings, my mother, family members to a certain extent, but I didn't feel anyone truly understood what I was going through. And in a sense, that was completely true. No one could know exactly what I was going through. But I also learned that people in our lives, whether it's siblings, family members, parents, friends, rebbeim, or community members, they can be a source of tremendous strength, even if they don't fully get it. And when we let them in, we can be surprised by how much support they can offer. I'm going to end with this. While my first Simchas Torah after my father passed away was one of the hardest days of my life, the next year was different. The pain was still there. There were plenty of tears, plenty of them, but I was still able to remember the joy and the laughter I shared with my father on that Yom Tov, on the previous Simchas Torahs. I was able to dance again, this time with friends and community members who showed me how much they really cared. It didn't erase the sadness and the pain I was experiencing, but it made space for joy simultaneously alongside that pain. I realized that I was not alone. It might mean finding the right person, and even more importantly, in some ways, not getting discouraged when that family member or that friend or rabbi, whoever it is, says the wrong thing, the things that can be really, really frustrating. There are really amazing supports out there. So I would encourage everyone here who feels alone, please reach out. Reach out to family, reach out to friends, to community, to OHEL. You can reach out to myself, or without asking Rosh, to the other people on this panel. There are people who really care deeply and who could be there for you. Lastly, to friends and family, take this step. Reach out to others. It can be really meaningful. As Mrs. Steinmetz shared, those flowers, those calls could really mean the world. So I just want to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to share here some of the things that I've experienced, some of the things that were helpful for me. I hope that something in these words will bring comfort even to one person, if not many. And Mirz Hashem, we should all have a lot of kayach to go through this year, and it should be Achsiva Siva Tova, Akubi Ben Shior. And Mirz Hashem, we should be Zochad, the Gula Shem Amitis, and the Archa, the Shatzi entire Bekarov.
Amen. Thank you very much, Dr. Benji Mayer. You spoke about the changing relationship with someone who passed away. It's not the same relationship. You spoke about living in the new world of a changing relationship with that individual and finding that one or two things that you connect with. And we recognize in this conversation this evening that we're speaking about a wide range of losses. You spoke about losing your father, your grandfather, very well-known people, Shlomo Meir, Leon Meir, well-known people in the community. I live in the Five Towns, and certainly that name is known in the community. And we also recognize there are individuals on this call like Fagi and others who've lost a child or may have lost a spouse. And each loss is a very individual loss and is understood differently. Thank you very much. Shani Waldman was 37 years old when she lost her husband. She was left with 6 young daughters, including a baby. Plagued by feelings of isolation and loneliness, Shani was determined to create a life of joy for her family. Together with her widowed friend, Brindy Halberstam, Shani co-founded Samchenu to support and nurture widows in the Jewish community. Shani, thank you very much for joining us this evening and sharing with us. And the other day when we spoke, you mentioned that unfortunately there were 3,100 widows that are part of the Samchenu system, the Samchenu program. 3,100 too many. Shani Waldman, thanks for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mandel. Thank you to OHEL for inviting me. I'm very touched. I appreciated what Fagi and what Dr. Meyer had to say. Fagi, yes, definitely the new you, the new Fagi. I mean, the members of Samchenu have discussed often that if our husbands came back, they would not recognize us. We're a different human being now. And I appreciated that. Dr. Meyer, I learned that on Moda'ani Lefanacha Melachai V'Kayim Shechazarta B'Nishmasi B'Chem L'Rabba Munasecha, that Hashem believes in us. And that's what your father gave to you, was his confidence in you and his enduring confidence in you today. And yes, I'm sure he does. And Hashem has confidence in us that we can make it through the day, that we can do what we have to. And this is a really hard time of year for anybody who suffered a loss. I've talked to different women now, I do all the time, and very capable people who keep it going all year long, you know, with, of course, the pain in their hearts, but find the Yom Tov very, very overwhelming. It's just stares you in the face. It's a very much a family time, and the loss really stares you in the face. We don't have to go too far to see Hannah in Shmuel used to go with her husband Elkanah up to the Beis Hamikdash for Yontif, and they would bring a carbon and they would eat. And the pasuk says, "Vativ kelo velo sochal." Penina, Hannah saw Penina with all of her children and all the people with all their children, and Penina sort of, you know, rubbed it in to try to jolt her to more tefillah, but in any case, it was too much for her. She got up and she left the table. She didn't have an appetite. She lost her appetite. She sat and cried. And that's how we feel at the Yontif table without our loved one with us. It's just like everybody's sitting there with their families, with everything that they have, and it's just, the feeling is overwhelming. I learned something new this summer that I'd like to share with you. I was on a program, and there was an individual there. I had not heard of him before. Perhaps you have. His name was Rav Mata Frank, and he is a mashpia in Breslov in Eretz Yisrael. And he spoke in Hebrew and in Yiddish. Yiddish, I barely understand. Hebrew, I do, but it's not my first language. And I really can't listen to a speech in Hebrew, but I understood everything he said. Credit to him, but also he was talking about my topic. It was Shabbos Nachamu, and he was talking about Nechama. And he was explaining the definition of the word Nechama, and he explained it very differently than I had ever heard. He said, Nechama is Vayinachem Hashem Asher Asa Esa Adam. Hashem, what is Vayinachem? Rashi says, Chashav Machshava Acheres. He thought a different thought. Almost he changed his mind, but changed his mind doesn't mean he changed his mind like he backtracked on what he thought before. It means that he had a different thought in his mind. And that's what Rabbi Frank described as Nechama. And he told an unbelievable story about the Brisker Rav who went with his son to be Menachem Ovel somebody. And any of us who have unfortunately had the experience of sitting Shiva know that the halachos of Avelos are that the person who's being Menachem Ovel shouldn't say anything until the Ovel speaks. The Ovel speaks first, and then you respond to him. Well, this particular individual didn't say anything. So the Brisker Rav and his son sat there, and then they said the pasuk, Hamakom Menachem, and then they got up and left. And his son said to him, we weren't Makayim the mitzvah, we have to go back. And the Brisker Rav said, well, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say that. It doesn't say you have to go back. We were Makayim the mitzvah. Think about it. If an Ovel is sitting there by himself, all alone, he feels despondent. He lost his loved one. He feels like the world came to an end. He feels like there's no reason to ever go forward. We came and we sat with him. So now he feels, oh, I have friends. I'm part of a community. People care about me. I have a future. He thought a different thought. Vayinachem, Nechama, that's Nechama, that he thought a different thought. And he quoted Rav Nachman of Breslov, who says, you cannot try to fight your thoughts. It's like one person fighting 60,000 soldiers. You're not strong enough. You're not going to win. But instead, what should you do? You should think another thought. You should think about something else. Think about something else. For years, I always thought that I'm running from one distraction to the next. If somebody invited me to go for a walk, invited me to go for lunch, if a friend would go on vacation with me, I always said yes. And I thought I'm running from one distraction to the next just to not swallow all that grief at once. And then I realized it's a way of life. What do I mean a way of life? Not distraction is a way of life, but a way of life is to not sit and focus on our loss all the time because we could not survive. And I will share with you that my husband, Alav Hashalom, said that I have a similarity in my thoughts to an ostrich. That I put my head in the sand and I don't look at everything. If there's something that bothers me, I put my head in the sand. Do you know what? I do. And that's how I survived the last 21 years. And that's how I have energy. And that's how I raised my children. And that's how I have koach to keep going on and to feel happy and excited, is that I couldn't look at it all the time. That doesn't mean I was in denial. That doesn't mean I didn't look at it. I cried so much that I lost my husband. Pesach, I didn't wear makeup from Pesach to Hanukkah until my mother bought me new makeup as a Hanukkah present because my eyes were always running, so my makeup was always running. It was always there, but I didn't think about it all the time. I survived by thinking other thoughts. Think about, well, Rabbi Frank said, think about Trump. Think about politics. Do something that you enjoy. Like I went out to lunch with my friends. Buy yourself new things for Yontif that are going to make you happy. Go for a walk. Cook food that you like to eat. Sit down and read something that takes your mind off it. Listen, Pirkei Avos says, Al tanachamehu b'sh'asha meso muto lefanav. Don't try to comfort your friend when his mace is sitting there in front of him and he has to take care of tachrichim and burial because he's busy. Well, Yontif is almost meso muto lefanav. It's almost as if the loss is right in front of you on Yontif. But how many hours do you have to focus on it? Even when somebody is burying the dead, does it take an hour of the 24? Does it take 2 hours of the 24? Whatever you're struggling and dealing with it, there are 24 hours in a day. The hours that you're not busy with it and that you're not focused on it, think other thoughts and busy yourself with something different and with other thoughts that can give your mind a break and give yourself a rest. I just had this conversation today with somebody in a slightly different way. We were talking about this idea that if somebody would, the difference between, because we've dealt with this very greatly at Samcheinu, the difference between somebody who passed away suddenly and somebody who was sick. And the challenge sometimes with somebody who was sick is that we remember the sickness and we remember how they suffered. And that's also thinking a different thought, is put that away and think about the good times and think about the Yontif when they were well and think about how they dressed up the kids for Purim and think about the beautiful sukkah table. Yes, that also makes you sad, but I'm speaking to those who can only think of a person who was suffering. And I'm telling you, we could also change that thought and remember somebody when they were well and when they were feeling happy. I want to end by telling you that this morning, just today in the car, I shuffle my own iTunes songs, and the A.B. Rattenberg song came on about the Yidden in Russia. And I used to sing that song. I was rushing back. I was shuttling back and forth for 9 months from Houston to New York. Most of the time I was in Houston, and now and then I came back. My husband had a stem cell transplant, and now and then I came back to New York, and that song had just come out. And the chorus was, how I dream that one day we will be together, doing all the things, he said, that brothers do. I said that families do. But I fear that I will have to dream forever, for only dreamers still believe that dreams come true. And I was dreaming, and we were all dreaming. My children were waiting for their father to come home. And I dreamed that our family could be together doing the normal things. And I got choked up this morning. It's 21 years later, because of the feelings that that evoked and the memory of singing it to my children. This is plan B for us. It was plan A for Hashem. I remember when Rabbi Foyer spoke in Muncie after a tragedy, and he said, it's a good thing I'm not God. I wouldn't have done it. So Hashem is running the world, and the loss is still there. It's before us. We need to make it through this yontif intact. But you are still a dreamer, and you've had to adjust your dreams. He ends off, I'm a dreamer who believes that dreams come true, and your dreams still can come true. May Hashem fulfill them for you and for all of us in so many wonderful ways in the coming year.
And thank you very much, Shani. And the conversation centered around changing your mindset. Different word, similar concept to what Dr. Mayer spoke about in terms of changing the relationship with the person that you lost, changing your mindset. Hashem has plan A, and you need to come up with plan B. That's a summary. Dr. Norman Blumenthal is a licensed clinical psychologist who serves as the director of trauma services for Ohel Zachter Family National Trauma Center. He's also the adjunct professor at the Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary and Furkov Graduate School of Psychology of Yeshiva University. In private practice in Cedarhurst, Dr. Blumenthal is also a Dayan arbitrator for the Beth Din of America. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Tzivi Ryder and Cheryl Shanovsky for organizing this evening's webinar and doing all the work behind the scenes to get us into this conversation this evening. Dr. Blumenthal, you've done a lot of work in anxiety and grief and bereavement and trauma. Give us your reflections on the conversation this evening, please. And we have quite a few questions that people have posed in advance of this evening, and also this evening we'd like to get to also. My privilege to introduce a colleague, Dr. Blumenthal.
Thank you very much, David. And I also want to express my gratitude to OHEL for the opportunity to do chesed, and as we do, and also thank Tzivi Ryder, Charlotte Chernovsky, Esther Usher, I see is on, and Samir for helping us, and also Laura Revach, who's also someone very much behind the scene. I also am going to express ask reshus from Roy Sonnenschein, because I will undeservedly cite some Torah sources, and it's certainly not appropriate for me to do so in his presence. In fact, I was thinking of actually that very halacha, because there is an isser. We're forbidden to be mara halacha b'pnei rabbo, to state a halacha, to teach Torah in the presence of your teachers. And from that vantage point, I shouldn't be talking today, because I am in the presence of my teachers, Fegi and Shani and Benji and everybody here, who has given a mental health professional the ultimate compliment, who has shared their very personal experiences and vulnerabilities. They are my teachers. And it's therefore really inappropriate for me to speak here. But I remember when my children were young, they used to love to call my father L'Abba Shalom on Rosh Chodesh Elul, because he would tell them that he has to start sinning, otherwise he'll have nothing to do on Yom Kippur. So I'll make sure I'm going to be over this Aveira now, so I'll have something to do on Yom Kippur. There are two pieces to preparing for the Yom Noraim. There's the piece that has been emphasized quite a bit, which is the fact that this is the very day that we ask for life. I remember one person who lost a child told me that when the Chazan came to that part of the Sanatokef, he was there in shul, and men have less of an excuse not for going to shul, and he started audibly crying. And the Chazan very wisely stopped davening, waited, and for 10 minutes he cried. And after davening, many people thanked him for enhancing the meaning of their tefillos. But that part maybe fits more neatly with the struggle of having lost a loved one. I would like to focus my attention, and I will do so from the vantage point of a psychologist, on the part of simcha, because that's also what we're facing. There's an element of simcha, as Rabbi Sonnenschein said in Rosh Hashanah too, and certainly there's no greater simcha than Sukkot and Simchas Torah. How can you be misameach when you're so consumed by grief and pain? And how do you face a Yom Tiv? Or how do you sit at that festive table when a person who, from your vantage point at least, so belongs there, is not there? And it's human nature that what's missing often very much overrides that which is present. I sometimes think about the halacha. The halacha is that with our schach, there has to be more schach than space. And the Gemara talks about, well, what happens if it's exactly equal? You have 1 inch schach and 1 inch space, and 1 inch schach and 1 inch space. Is that a kosher sukkah? So the Gemara says it isn't, because light expands. But homiletically, I think there's another explanation, because usually what's missing looms a lot larger than what's present. And therefore, when there's an inch missing and there's an inch present, that missing inch looks much more than an inch. And that's what people are facing. So I want to try to give a perspective, at least one perspective or a way to somehow achieve simcha, despite or in the presence, in the throes of grief. And many of you know that I'm a big fan of the great sage and Talmudist Yogi Berra, and I love yogiisms. And one of the stories I read once was actually written by his son about growing up in his house. And he described that they were driving up to Cooperstown, New York, upstate New York, which is the Baseball Hall of Fame, for the inauguration of the new members of the Hall of Fame. And driving as a family, at one point, Yogi Berra is driving and he turns off the highway and he goes another highway, and they're on this empty rural road and they're just cruising along. After a few minutes, his wife says to him, by the way, this is before GPSs, his wife says to him, Yogi, I think you made a wrong turn. We're going the wrong way. He said, yeah, but we're making great time. It happens to be an element of life that sometimes we make very great time going the wrong way. But this very much focuses us on what is the goal and what is the action of getting to that goal. There's an area in psychology called positive psychology. It's about 25 to 30 years old. A psychologist woke up one day and said, we spend years and years studying why people are depressed. Let's study why people are happy. And so that's come to the field now. It's been studied exhaustively, called positive psychology. And within that field, there's some very interesting studies done by Dr. Iris B. Moss from University of Denver. In particular, there's one article, and I think the title of the article sort of captures what she studies. The article is titled, Can Seeking Happiness Make People Unhappy? Paradoxical Effects of Valuing Happiness. I'll say it again. Can seeking happiness make people unhappy? Paradoxical effects of valuing happiness. And what she found was that people who were very focused on the goal, very focused on achieving happiness, tended not to be so happy. But those who engaged in activities that lead to happiness, without focusing so much on the goal of happiness, were actually happier people. Or as we often say, it's more the journey than the destination. And I remember reading through some of these articles, and I realized I had one of those all too often moments of, yeah, Chazal knew that all along. Because the third, if I recall correctly, the third mission in Pirkei Avos said in the name of Atignos Ish Tzaucho, says, Al tiyu kavodim hamishamshim esarav, am nasa kabel pras. Don't be like a servant who's working for his master in order to get an reward. Havu kavodim hamishamshim esarav shalom nasa kabel pras. Don't be busy with the reward. Be the servant, do what you're supposed to do, and then you'll get you'll achieve the reward. But don't be busy looking at the reward. Again, the idea that it's the activities, but not necessarily the focus on the happiness. Similarly, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that Ein ben David Yisyashum in Hagula. Mashiach won't come until we've given up on Mashiach coming. We shouldn't be busy focusing on the times of Mashiach. We have to do what's necessary to get to that point, and then Mashiach will come. For me personally, it may seem like a silly example, but as I've mentioned previously, and some of you may know, my outlet, my therapy is hiking. I try about once a month, get together with a bunch of guys my age with a lot of krechsing. We spend a day in the woods hiking. In fact, I created a fake organization. I call it AIC, stands for Arthritic Country Hiking Expedition. And it's us guys, and we hike for a day. And we usually hike in Harriman State Park around Bear Mountain area. There's hundreds of miles of trails, and it's a nice mix of climbing and going down and plateaus and rivers and lakes. But every once in a while, there's a mountain. Now, I'm not talking Mount Everest. It's quite a mountain, maybe it's like Mount Sinai. But it's a half hour of elevation. It's exhausting. And I've learned over the years that when I'm about to start the climb, if I look at the peak, I have a miserable hike. If I just focus on what's around me, I have a very enjoyable hike. And I get to the top and say, wow, I got here. When I'm focusing on the peak, by the time I get to the top, I just want to collapse and catch my breath. But when I don't focus on the peak, but I focus on what I have to do to get to the peak, I have a very meaningful hike. So my message to all of you, based on this research, is it's very hard to achieve a simcha, and it can't possibly be, it's be very hard, perhaps, to have the simcha that you had before your loss. But do what's necessary to create a simcha. Make festive meals, do the simanim, dip the apple and the challah in the honey, shake the lulav, sit in the sukkah, and don't stare at the mountaintop. Do whatever extent you can, and some simcha, or the simcha that is appropriate to your current situation, will come your way. Just in closing, I saw a quote, and I think it sort of captures this as well. Enjoy the little things in life, but one day you may look back and realize that they were the big things. I hope my remarks are helpful. I hope that this is a year of nechama for all of us, and that everybody should have a ksiva v'chasima tova.
Thank you very much, Dr. Blumenthal. I'm going to stay with you for a moment. We have time for a few questions, and I want to begin with you, Dr. Blumenthal, and then I'm going to go to the panelists and ask you if you could be concise on a very complex question, to be concise and offer one thought for these very difficult questions. People say that the pain will get easier. They say, we don't know who they are, but they say, they're very popular people. People say that the pain will get easier, Dr. Blumenthal. I'm still waiting. Does it really ever get easier?
So that's a great question. I'm not sure if the pain gets easier. It's not a pain that gets easy, and it's not a pain that goes away, but the pain changes. I think for me, what I've observed from close to 30 years of doing this work is that the pain becomes more integrated. Pain becomes more manageable. In early grief, the pain is something foreign assaulting you. As time goes on, and I'll be curious if the panelists who lived through this feel the same, as time goes on, the pain gets woven into your landscape. It becomes part of you. I think what was striking to me once, I was running a group for parents who lost children, and there was one woman who was about 5 years out, if you will, and another woman was in her first year. And the 5-year woman wanted to explain to the first-year woman what it was like now 5 years later. And she said to her, I now wear my grief around me in a basket, and I reach in and take it out when I need it. And I think that's what happens over time.
Peggy Steinmetz, we spoke about 3 different types of losses in this conversation: the loss of a child, the loss of a parent, the loss of a spouse. Peggy, Dovi died 5 years ago. And the whole world was involved in that tragedy in Meron. It was a personal loss, and yet everyone knew what was going on, and you spoke a little bit about that. Faggy, people say that the pain will get easier. I'm still waiting. Does it really ever get easier, Faggy?
That's a hard one. Honestly, I think I told this to Tzivi Writer, one of the grief retreats that I went on. In the beginning, the grief is so overwhelming. The pain is it's just too much. Honestly, I was just not strong enough to be in control. So I describe grief as my plus one constant companion. It's always there and it's always going to be there. And in the beginning, it was the dominant one in my relationship. It told me how to be, how not to be. It had all the power. But as I grew stronger physically and emotionally, I began to take control and I became the dominant one in the relationship. And I can tell grief, okay, I'm here, I'm okay now. But it's always there. It's always at my side. It's part of who I am. And then there are days where there are triggers and it's hard. There are birthdays, there are yardzites, there's Yomim Tovim. And I say, you know what, grief, today you get to be in control. You're the dominant one today because tomorrow I'll be back and I'll be stronger. But right now I need a day off. I need to wallow. I need to embrace every emotion that I'm going to feel. And I feel very strongly that if you don't embrace those emotions, you can never move forward. You have to feel the anger, you have to feel the shock, the awe, the rawness, the grief, everything. If you don't feel, it's going to backfire. And I'm at a point right now, 4.5 years in, where I'm not, time doesn't heal all wounds. Whoever coined that phrase, never suffered loss. But I can navigate my pain better. I can wear a mask a little bit better. And I am stronger. And it became a part of who I am. It's not going to leave. The pain will always be there, but I'm okay with it. It's just part, it's Faggy 2.0. It's part of me. And I accept that. And accepting that is also moving forward and healing.
We have a couple of very important expressions that we'll share this evening. You just said 3 words that are very important. Navigate your pain. You navigate your pain. You be in control of your own navigation of the compass. Don't let others navigate your pain for you. Dr. Benji Mayer was still speaking about someone who lost a child as opposed to a parent or a spouse. So I want you to reach into your bag of work that you do with folks in grief, bereavement, and trauma. The question that's asked is, we go to my siblings every year in Florida for Sukkot, but I find it so difficult to be with everyone. They have all their children, and one of mine is missing. How do I make myself happy and not feel the loss? And if I may, we've done webinars on fertility, individuals that experience fertility or infertility. And that question has been asked also. How can I go to my siblings? I love my nieces and nephews, but I'm sitting there, the whole house is so happy and full, and my husband and I, we're relishing to have our own. Do I really need to accept invitation? Do I really need to go? And the circumstance is obviously different in this conversation of losing a child, Rahman al. And the answer is, like Faggy Steinman says, navigate your pain. You don't have to accept every single invitation. You can decide. But here we have a situation. They're invited. They may even want to go, but how do they participate? How do they enjoy?
So thank you for the question. And it's a really complicated question. And no, I don't think any easy answer. I think the similar theme that I notice in what people are kind of suggesting and what definitely the thought that's coming to my mind is something I experienced is you're not supposed to get rid of that pain. And it's okay to have that pain. And it's a very normal thing. And it is all the more challenging when we're in that situation, when we're confronted with other people's happiness. What I would say, and this is something that I definitely worked on myself, and it's very, very challenging, is it's okay to have that pain, continue to have that pain, but allow yourself to be in those situations where you can be around other people being happy. And even more importantly than other people's simcha is that it's not a contradiction and you can have both of those those dichotomies, those opposite emotions at the same time, despite how challenging it is. And I would just add a last thing is that for me, very often I didn't want to have the happiness. It felt like I was moving forward, which was inappropriate and something I didn't want to do. And sometimes recognizing you can have both of those at the same time is, I think, the only way to go.
Well, I stand and shine. I want to ask you a question that's rabbinical and godly, and um, there's a question on the chat about a woman who lost her daughter a few weeks before Rosh Hashanah, and she doesn't really feel like davening. She doesn't really feel like going to shul. She's very comforted and consoled by being in the house and cooking, preparing, and maintaining her own relationship with Rosh Hashanah. Is that okay?
Yeah, I was very happy to hear Mrs. Steinmetz talk about her being in touch with her Rav about going to shul, and it's certainly okay. It's so important in these types of situations for a person to know that there's so many different paths to Hakadosh Baruch Hu. And especially as you pointed out, the responsibilities for men and for women are different. If it was a man that was struggling, I would also consider that maybe sometimes it's hard to go to shul, but it would be a little bit different. For a woman, certainly, although it's so valuable and so precious when women are able to make it to shul, and so chashuv that when they do. But if this is not the year for that, and what you said is so, I was so moved from even the way you asked the question, that she's fine. She's having her Rosh Hashanah at home. It's not even that she's saying I'm not doing Rosh Hashanah, which would also be understandable in a certain amount of pain. But if she's being courageous and she's saying I'm going to make these meals and I'm going to sit by the table and I'm going to take care of my family, and the truth is, I have to tell you, instead of looking at it like a heter for her not to go to shul, I'm in awe of a woman that's prepared to do that after dealing with a loss.
Dr. Blumenthal, I've heard you say that your voice and your body may show even more than your words. We don't always want to talk. We don't necessarily want to answer people's questions. So when you come up to the holidays or the Yomim Noraim and you're going to shul, and how do you allow your body and your voice to express your emotion without having to speak, Dr. Blumenthal?
One of the things that I've learned from being almost half a century in this field is that most profound human experiences defy words, and therefore are very often communicated through tears, through body language, voice tones, and by the way, no less important, silence. One of the most moving Erushim I ever saw was the Abarbanel on Vayidam Ara. And by the way, don't be impressed with my lumdus. It's limited to Avelis and trauma. I'm not, if I can quote an Abarbanel on Vayidam Ara, I might sound a lot smarter than I am. But the Abarbanel, the question is, why does it say Vayidam? It should, why don't the typical word for silence is shtika? Why does it say Vayishtok? And the difference, other commentators say is, and then the Barbanelba says it as well, is that Vayishtok means you have something to say, but you choose not to say it. We have a Rav in our community who likes to say that a fish would never get caught if he kept his mouth shut. That's a mile too, not to say. But Vayidam is that deep, abiding silence when there are no words. And the Barbanel says it very beautifully. It's like he had nothing, he couldn't say anything because no words would capture the depth of Aaron's loss on that most happy day when he lost his two sons. There were no words, and therefore his silence was a communication. I remember once running a group for parents who lost children, and one man described coming home with his 2-year-old son after the doctors just told him, go home and wait for him to die. And he described to the group how he came home and he had a slide, he had a swing set in his backyard, With his son in his hand, he sat in the swings and went back and forth on the swings. And the group was quiet for what felt like an eternity, and probably was just 2 minutes. But it was that group silence that captured what was happening there, because there were no words for it.
Yanni, I'm going to one last question. I'm going to talk about kibbud avim, respect for a parent who's gone. We know that the halacha is that the rule is that after 12 months, there's no more availus. There is no way to be fulfill the mitzvah of honor your father and your mother in a tangible way. It goes into another category, which is a whole separate conversation. So the question that was posed is, um, my husband died. We're coming up to the holidays, and I have several children and an oldest son. Can he sit? Should he sit in my husband's chair? On the one hand, on the other hand, and there's a certain amount of pressure on the oldest son in terms of leading the table. I know that you have daughters. What is the guidance for the so many widows, the too many widows that you speak with in terms of the conversation? Do you sit in the chair?
So yes, the women have discussed many different options for seating, and as Faggy said beforehand, she doesn't do it, but she recognized that some people leave an empty chair. I sat at the other head of the table. But part of your question involves, and what you're not saying, like what did they want and what the son wants? Because if the son feels prepared to lead the table and run the Yontif table for his family, certainly there's nothing wrong with him sitting in that place. Everybody knows he's not the father, but you need to have somebody sitting in that place, and the son would be a very good choice. On the other hand, if it's going to be pressure for the son and he's not going to be comfortable and he doesn't feel ready, then you don't want to. Depends how old the son is. Women give their 13-year-olds to make Kiddush and Havdalah, and sometimes there's a pride in that, and sometimes there's also like, it's very overwhelming for the child because they're not ready. So it depends when the person is ready. If you don't mind, I would like to go back to that question that you addressed beforehand about, does the grief get better? Is it okay if I spend a moment talking about that, Dr. Mendel?
One moment.
Okay, Faggy was very, very honest. And really said what I'm saying in different words, because this is a big thing that comes up by the ladies with Samchenu. And people will come into a shiva and tell a woman it doesn't get any better. And it's a horrible thing. And I'm telling that to everyone who's listening and everyone who will watch. I believe personally, I feel strongly about it. It's an awful thing to say to a newly grieving person, it doesn't get any better. And Almana said to me, a woman who has kids at home said to me, people said that to her during Shiva, and she said, what should I do? Die? Like, this is the end of my life. It doesn't get any better. So I will tell you, my answer is, of course it gets better. And anyone who says it doesn't get better doesn't remember how bad it was at the beginning. The crushing, horrible grief of you feel like half your body was torn apart while you're living. And that horribleness, of course, gets better. And I believe that what the person is really trying to say is, it didn't get all better. It still hurts. And it doesn't get all better. It's always going to be there. But of course, it gets better than what it's going to be at the beginning, than what it was at the beginning.
Thank you. Rabbi Sonnenschein, I'm going to give you the last word. Before I do, I'm going to remind people to please stay on an extra moment and complete the survey that will just take you a minute or two to do. It'll help us plan for the future. Rabbi Sonnenschein, just a twist on this question about sitting in the father's seat. So let's say that mom would like her oldest son to sit in the chair. It'll give her some level of comfort. And the oldest son is not comfortable sitting in that chair. He's not his father, but his mother is asking him. Rabbi Sonnenschein.
I don't think there's a black and white answer to that question. I would want to sit with both the mother and the child and work it through with them. And I also feel like there are panelists here that could probably give a better answer than me. But what I would suggest to the son is, if he absolutely felt too overwhelmed to do it, that he should tell his mother, Mommy, I'm going to sit there. I just need a little time until I'm ready.
or Siddur for Kiddush and for the
Yeah.
challah, and then go sit someplace else, something that's something. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for my Sun and Shine, Faggy Steinmetz, Shani Waldman, Dr. Benji Meyer, and Dr. Norman Blumenthal, and to Tzivi Ryder and Cheryl Shanovsky, and to Esther Asher. And Zamir, you're sitting in Texas. Everything should go well for you in Texas. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this evening. We wish everyone a Ksiva V'Chsima Tova, a wonderful, happy, and healthy New Year. May all of your requests be fulfilled by Hashem in every way that you want. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.